evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Fields. My guest today, we're going to take a little U-turn from our normal cannabis conversation and venture into the world of hemp. My guest, co-owner of Tiger Fiber in Sauget, Illinois, Mr. James Forbes. James, thank you so much for being on The Fields, man.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, let's unpack some terminology first. You hear the words hemp and industrial hemp almost used interchangeably, but the two of them are really different. Can you explain the differences between the two?
I would say that hemp is more of an anecdotal slang term for everything cannabis. More often than not, people think I'm using old 1970s terms for medicinal or recreational marijuana. The industrial hemp, the word industrial in front of hemp tends to lead to more of a connotation of what is classified as cannabis sativa L under 0.3% THC. Legal hemp here federally in the United States, and actually subsidized by a lot of government agencies now. So that is to me what the difference between hemp and industrial hemp is. And in the industrial hemp vertical, there's hemp for CBD or therapeutical hemp for, medicinal stuff like the beverage here for the CBD. Mm-hmm. There's grain industrial hemp for food and other types of applications in the feed industry and consumption industry for dietary reasons. And the really perfect blend of omegas 3, 6, and 9 fatty acids. And then fiber in the industrial hemp world is what I focus on, which is the separation from the exterior bast fiber from the interior woody core of hemp to make the alternatives to textiles, plastics, lumbers, and cements, and everything else that you can make out of those base materials.
Tell me about the origins of Tiger Fiber. How is it that a hemp processing facility comes to be in Sauget?
How much time do we have? 'Cause that's a long story.
Let's do the Reader's Digest version. We've only got a half an hour.
Okay, yeah. So, Reader's Digest version, prior to getting into industrial hemp, I'm actually still am active in the medicinal cannabis industry. I was working on going after some applications with some partners across the country, and one group of folks in Pennsylvania were, before legislation had passed, just getting to work with the state on cannabis. And I asked them how and what they were doing, and they told me they were growing hemp on University of Pennsylvania land legally, and I just had to know more. And then, because I thought when they said hemp, I was like, why aren't you guys calling it, weed or marijuana or medicinal cannabis? Why are you saying hemp? That's so weird. And they really meant they were growing the 20-foot tall stalks and doing variety trials. And then I just kept asking questions, and this isn't like 2016. So this was before the 2018 Farm Bill had even passed. So it was still kind of unknown. And in Missouri in 2016, it was still a Class A felony. Laws hasn't passed here yet, and the federal government hadn't legalized it. But Reader's Digest version, they're telling me that they're growing hemp for fiber and that it's already in BMW, Audi, Mercedes, Levi's, Patagonia, that there's exploration for it as alternatives to fiberglass insulation, to car panels, to the clothes we wear, to everything. Literally everything in this room could be made out of hemp. And so I got radicalized by a book. I read the book titled Hempbound by the author Doug Fine. And that's when he starts to dive into over, 25,000 known uses for hemp already that are majority fiber-based. And I just thought, wow, this is not something you are smoking, eating, consuming. This makes sense for Missouri because we have large agricultural community. These guys in Pennsylvania are using tractors and combines and sickle bars and disc mowers to harvest this crop with just regular old balers.
Now, you said it's good for the people and farmers of Missouri, yet your processing facility is in Sauget. You have a sort of different relationship than, say, a farmer seeking out someone to process their product. You seek out the farmers first,
right,
and ask them to grow your seed that you then collect and process.
Correct. And how we got into, Sauget and also Fenton as well. But the reason we're in the area is that the reason folks just don't naturally grow hemp now that it's legal is someone has to be there to buy it and do something. It's kind of like the relationship between the corn grower and the grain bin and elevator, or the cotton grower and the cotton gin. We consider ourselves a hemp gin. So we are, now that laws have passed, the largest, most active hemp fiber processor in our region.
How many hemp processing facilities are there in America? Do you know?
Two that I know are really active. There's a lot more popping up, but that's the thing. It has to be a regional commodity, because the logistics and the distance and just the sheer mileage that crops would have to travel across the country to get to the less than 10 of us that are active in the industry domestically just doesn't make mathematical sense. So we're in what is known as climate zone 6B, 7A. So we're in a pretty solid area to grow hemp for fiber, and we have a lot of flat land, get a good amount of precipitation. Our farmers are some of the best in the country. It's why like ADM and Cargill have, such a heavy presence around us, as they know where to get corn and soybeans from. And that's the same with us as hemp, by being able to reach out to, Missouri and Illinois farmers to supply our facilities. We can start adding hemp into legal rotations.
Is it true that hemp can be grown in any climate, any environment?
Yes, to an extent, it can be grown in any climate, but growing and thriving aren't necessarily the same. We've learned that the hard way this year.
Okay. It didn't thrive this year. Was it because lack of water or too much humidity?
It thrived in some places. We spread out this year, so we had some areas north of Highway 70 that had perfect growing conditions. The field that we visited, was like perfect. You couldn't have asked for better soil, the right amount of rain, the right amount of sun, the right amount of wind, and flat land that's not flooded. Further south, like way south of Highway 70, right on the Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas border, we were, working with farmers, small plots though, so nothing massive, 20 acres here, 40 acres there, to see how much further we can extend our footprint, because we're still trying to get rural Midwestern farmers acclimated to growing cannabis. And you still got to get a fingerprint, thumbprint background to grow it, but we're trying, and they're dealing with severe record-setting droughts, excessive temperatures over 100 degrees, and cannabis is still cannabis, even if it's industrial hemp. I mean, it gets heat stressed, it gets stunted. Or on the flip side of that, being in a dry cycle for so long and then getting, 4 inches of rain, and then it gets wet feet. So you still have to have, a good like wet dry cycle, good drainage, the right amount of NPK, the right pH. It's got to be in between 6 and 7 for it to thrive. But you could also just as soon throw a bunch of seeds in the deserts, and some of them are going to make it as long as there's a little bit of rain. It's a broadleaf weed.
So are there any natural enemies to hemp besides drought and overwatering?
There's still a lot of the same pests and issues that you would see in any cannabis situation. The beautiful thing for what we do in hemp fiber is we can get aphids, we can get mites, we can have yellowing leaves, because at the end of the day, we're not getting much floral production. We're essentially like shooting for the late veg cycle before you would naturally see the flowering, less sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
And so those types of issues are devastating for people growing floral hemp or, food hemp, because you need the flowers to either get, the cannabinoids and the terpenes out of the medicine side, or the grain out of the food side. So those are all issues. Any grower that's had any type of pest issue, we're going to see the same in the industrial hemp industry, no matter which subset of industrial hemp we're talking about. The benefit of it, though, is it is a natural, resistor to all of the other pests that we see that would naturally attack, like a corn crop, a soybean crop, a cotton crop. There's different bugs out there. Those bugs don't like hemp. And the difference between hemp and those crops is, and nothing against the commodity crops. I won't say anything bad about it, but I will say that there's a reason you see so much synthetic nutrients and synthetic fertilizers that are killing soil biology, that are causing soil erosion, which is leading to real climate change. The inability to absorb the right amount of CO2 from the atmosphere, which the soil is a gigantic carbon sink, or it's supposed to. Those synthetics are really causing a lot of harm, and it's causing runoff in the waterways. It's one of those big issues on what do you do? Like, well, rotate the crops so farmers have a reason to pivot away from some of those, synthetic application, and at least help people that want to start going organic and producing, food and medicine and not commodities all the time can.
Now, when I took the tour of your facility, you showed me the inside, which was really cool. There were bales of hemp rolled up just like you would think of a bale of hay, stocked against the wall. And then you had the machinery side. Now, I know the first step is the decortication process. In fact, that was the first term I learned about when I found out about hemp. I memorized it, decorticator. It's just so much fun to say. But can you take me through the process of when you bring a bale into the facility, how it goes into the machinery and comes out in the different grades?
Absolutely. So it truly is like a cotton gin. So similar to how a raw bale of cotton would go into a gin, we grade and score that bale, and we pay the farmers accordingly on kind of a sliding scale. The less weeds and dead bugs and trash that's in the bales, the higher on the price per pound scale we can offer. We bring the bales in, and then we break them open. We essentially have, a gigantic bale knife that sizes down what would be the equivalent of a Volkswagen Beetle sized bale. That's how big these bales really are. And you were there. And so you have to cut that in half so that it can fit into our equipment line. And so our equipment line goes through a number of shredding and comminution milling. And so it's
comminution?
Comminution is when something gets smaller and sizes itself down over time by a lot of friction and hitting itself. So there's grinders, there's pulverizers, there's knives, and then there's making stuff spin around and hit itself. It's like essentially like a tornado is what we're doing to the hemp. And the reason that we take that approach is you don't want to damage too much of the cellulosic lignin, the plant glue and plastic that makes cannabis so strong and able to hold up really heavy flowers.
It doesn't get damaged when it's in a tornado and knives and grinding and all that?
At the molecular level. So that process separates the exterior skin from the woody core. And so that exterior bast fiber is around 20 to 25% of hemp stalks. That is what goes into textiles, fiberglass alternatives, non-wovens. So anything that cotton or fiberglass goes into, that's where that fiber can go into. On the flip side, the hemp hurd, the woody interior core, it's kind of like if you had a bunch of, like chunks of trees that you were trying to do something with. There's very few things you can do other than like sit on it. So when you think of wood pulp and all the things that a tree can turn into, same thing with the inside of cannabis, except stronger, and it doesn't take 20 plus years to mature. It takes like 90 days to mature. And so those materials need to be sized a certain way. And it's our push for more industry standardization. And I say that because companies that are in the automotive industry, so they're like General Motors, Ford, BMW, whoever, they have specs and things that they're already using from the wood industry. They can't just accept, stuff that will not work for their billions of dollars of infrastructure, because it's still a business. We have to profit, they have to profit. So in order for us to have material that we could sell to those types of customers and consumers, we have to size the material down to a certain size so that they can either use it as is or use their equipment lines to size it down further. And so
So some of those grades that you have, I saw 3 on the tour. You had some that were small enough for microplastics, some that were a little bigger for animal bedding, and some that were really chunky for use in things like hempcrete.
Absolutely. And so we designed our line to address where we knew the demand was. And so with the push for more sustainable, affordable housing that's also carbon negative, that's also energy efficient, there's so much stuff going into like high tech stuff, like solar panels, wind turbines, like synthetics and lighter plastic homes. And then there's like the old school ways that indigenous people use, which is natural fibers and mortars to make a vapor permeable wall. And so seeing how big the hemp housing market is just taking off in Europe and now starting to take off in the country, we knew that if the Europeans are using a certain size of hemp hurd to spray it into walling systems or to have small crews poured into precast forms, or similar to the approach we're taking, make really lightweight, really strong prefabricated walls and just snapping them together, we should probably copycat that sizing. And so that's where that sizing came from. And then knowing that the animal bedding just happens to be a good business market, but that smaller size is really just a good absorbent. It can absorb oil. We've had to use it and test it. And we've absorbed, motor oil, hydraulic fluid, cat urine, all in Sauget, Illinois, using that material. And it just so happens that wood shavings and other synthetic fillers are predominantly what pets and other animals are, using as their bedding. And then there's also hemp now too that can do that as well, but also cleaning up the soil and sequestering CO2.
And safer for the animals that use it. They're
Absolutely.
not taking those plastic particles in.
And it's also, not putting off as much dust. It's, like hypoallergenic. That's like a big thing for respiratory health and animals and people as well. I mean, if you're in a classroom and you're constantly breathing in pet shavings every time you change the guinea pig's like cage, that's not good. It's like real stuff. And then the smallest size for the microplastics, when you think about how are plastics made, it's, like different petroleum compounds that are itty bitty sizes that turn into slightly itty bitty but bigger beads that then get heated up and then smashed together, and then you have plastics. And so again, hemp is, cellulosic, like plant plastic. And so you have the ability just to take something that's not dead dinosaurs, and it's just every 90 days you get a lot of plastic making material all in the same crop.
Now let's go back to when you mentioned the 2018 Farm Bill, because that's what legalized CBD production in America and encouraged so many farmers to start growing that crop. But because there was a glut on the market, prices crashed and people started selling their crops for use to extract synthetic cannabinoids such as Delta 8, Delta 10, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of propped up the hemp market, but it's created a loophole in legal psychedelics. Do you think that loophole needs to be closed with the 2023 Farm Bill, or do you think it's good for the industry?
Man, I mean, that I've never actually been posed that question before. I guess like just shooting from the hip. I mean, I personally think all cannabis should be just decriminalized immediately and then legalized soon. So, I mean, I'm a cannabis, cultivator, consumer, and distributor. And again, I mean, we have not had enough time to conduct a lot of research on any like short-term, mid-term, long-term effects. And we can't really do that while it's, a Schedule I narcotic. As far as the Farm Bill, I really think with the way that the country is moving and the economy is moving and just the will of the people is moving, I would say that for the 2023 Farm Bill that, like less government, oversight and less restrictions will make a lot more sense for the industry. I mean, I'm a big advocate of, raising the definition of hemp from above 0.3% THC. And I say that because we have, farmers that are like very involved in their community, like hyper conservative farmers, some of them are, like really religious people are like pastors, and they're the difference between them being a legal hemp farmer and being a class A felon, by the way the law is written, is like a couple of molecules and a couple of like heat spikes, and it's like, well, we're supposed to be under 0.3% THC, but we tested at 0.6. That's not that big of a jump. And, if you're going to raise it to 1% or you're going to just keep, why wouldn't you just say, you know what, just not do this, So
how do you convince the farmers, though, especially the really conservative ones, that they're growing rope, not dope?
Show them. I mean, like we've had to get out in front of, like small groups at duck hunting clubs. We've had to go sit at people's kitchen tables in population, less than 500 people towns. Worked a lot with University of Missouri systems, worked a lot with other early adopters and advocates that came from those communities and got they knew from the jump that hemp, especially industrial hemp fiber, is not at all touching on any psychoactive cannabis. It's truly rope, not dope. But the way that we've been able to talk through it is just economics. I mean, at the end of the day, farmers are some of the most underappreciated but still hardest working people you'll ever meet. I mean, the truest salt of the earth you will find. But when people think of what a farmer does, they don't realize how much work goes into everything. And when you think about like corn farmers, like they have to buy all that seed, put up all of the labor, do, take care of all the fuel. They have to have all the equipment. So you have people that are upfront paying a lot of money. I mean, per acre, the economics and the profit margins are really small. And this is even today in record-setting corn and soybean and cotton commodity markets where the prices are high because there's been less production globally. I mean, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but Ukraine is one of the largest grain suppliers on the planet. They're not growing a lot of grain right now. And so you see this huge demand where it didn't exist, but then you also see a correlating, if not good, increase in synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, and seeds. So when we tell a farmer that you do less work, you spend less money, and we'll pay you a little bit more than if you were growing these other crops. Again, we're not promising people ridiculous prices like $2,000 a pound or $4,000 a kilo or this, that, or the other. We're saying that we'll pay you, like 20 cents a pound for your hemp stalk. And when you do the math about how much 1 million plants weigh on an acre, it's a lot of money per acre.
What's a bale weigh?
A bale weighs anywhere from like 800 to 1,500 pounds. Because there's no standardization. I mean, we have these gigantic 1,500 pound square bales, and we have, because what the farmer that grew the crop had, they had a big square baler because they do really big modules of hay. And then you have other farmers that do the itty bitty squares because they're more, like show and market for people to sit on hay. Then you have guys that have big round balers because they feed cattle with that hay. And so that varies, but depending on the size, I would say per acre, people are averaging 8,000 to 10,000 pounds per the acre.
Really quickly, because we don't have a ton of time left. When we took the tour, you had different bales. You had some that were inside that were wrapped in one color fabric. You had some outside that were wrapped in red, white, and blue fabric. Was there a difference? Was it a different type of hemp?
Actually, no, that was all the Jinma Asian variety for hemp fiber genetics. It was grown in different parts of Missouri by different farmers. And so the farmer that had the American flag bale wrap just happened to have it and liked it, and that's what he had on hand. We try and tell the farmers, don't go getting new stuff. Like when we do our initial meetups and assess whether or not it's a good fit, because we don't want people to fail. But it's like, well, you got a baler? Like, yeah. It's like, well, do you know how to do this, that, and the other? Like, of course. It's like, well, do that, but with hemp.
So you already said that a crop tests hot if it's got 0.3% or more THC in it. What happens to that crop if it tests hot? You just leave it in the field and let it ret?
Actually, that's just new. Yeah, they just now allowed that to happen. So on the fiber side, that's a good thing for us, but it messes up the economics because these tests aren't free to send in. And so the way that last year, if you tested above 0.3% THC, you had to like burn the crop or mulch it in front of the sheriff and put it back on the ground. Yeah, no, there was like no give to it. But then so many farmers tested hot and lost millions of dollars, growing any type of hemp, especially the CBD hemp. I mean, it's like people are going bankrupt because they had to burn all of their crops, because it tested hot. The remediation that's been allowed through the USDA is you take a field test, and if you pass, good, harvest your crop, you're good to go. If you test hot, it's like, well, you get one more test, but you have to chop the crop down, and you're allowed to test the stalk. For a fiber grower like ourselves, that's a nice, it's a good thing just because no one should have to destroy their crop. But on the CBD and the grain food side, if your only other recourse is you have to chop that crop as is and you're not allowed to harvest the flowers or the seeds, it's like, well, thanks, I guess. I guess in that instance, call Tiger Fiber and we'll at least buy the stalks off of you.
Well, folks, that's going to do it for another episode of The Fields. As always, I have to thank Utopia Experience for the use of this wonderful studio. What can I say about them at episode 6 that I haven't said already? How about they create lifelong memories through celebration? Whether it's a party, a fundraiser, or an annual conference, they facilitate genuine connections and transform lives. There's a mission statement right there if I've ever heard one. And thank you to today's sponsor, Robust. They've been most generous this season, 3 episodes to date. And I mess with them because they make a good product, organically grown in living soil. Each pot gets 3 worms too, how cool is that? The flower is fragrant and the varietals are exceptional. Get that bright red bag with the rising sun. And thank you to my sponsor, Nomad World Citizen. I said it last time, we all got to start thinking of ourselves as citizens of this planet, not just residents of different places with lines on a map. We're all part of the Terran race, so let's all start acting like it. And thanks to my guest tonight, James Forbes. James, thank you for shining a light on an often underlooked part of the cannabis industry. I really appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Likewise, man. Thanks for helping us spread the word. Appreciate everything you guys are doing too.
And thank you to all of you out there for watching. We'll see you next time.